Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. It's another Dump the Corruption show. And the topic is, if you care about healthcare, ... what follows. Okay, if you care about healthcare. Well, okay, one thing that follows, if you really care about healthcare, then don't vote for Donald Trump. If you really care about healthcare, then don't vote for Joe Biden. Because if you really care about healthcare, then you're either going to be for Medicare for all or for a national health service. Because otherwise, we're still going to have people dying from lack of health insurance, going bankrupt, okay, from lack of health insurance, having divorces because they don't have any health insurance, and they fall into difficulties, okay, of all kinds. It's just a travesty. What I want to do tonight was to cover just a few things in relation to the healthcare agendas that we see around us. Let me begin by sharing this video on Facebook so some people can notice that I'm streaming. I want to talk about peace that appeared in the American Prospect. It asked the question, will voters hear about Donald Trump's deranged healthcare agenda? A second Trump term means tens of millions of people losing insurance and chaos, okay, in the hospitals. This one is by Ryan Cooper. It appeared on April 1st, 2024. And there's a protester with a sign, Stop Trump's Healthcare Sabotage. StandUpToSabotage.com. Seen from a protest at the Supreme Court, demanding the court preserve the Affordable Care Act on November 10th, 2020 in Washington, D.C. The most public legislative faceplant of the Trump presidency was surely his party's failure to repeal Obamacare. Oh, God. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can get rid of what's blocking the screen here. Okay, maybe that does something. It's been half forgotten already, but a repeal bill passed the House and only failed in the Senate by one vote. John McCain, then Senator from Arizona, Republican from Arizona, decided against it at the last minute. That single vote prevented something like 23 million people from being kicked off their insurance, as well as untold damage to the insurance and provider systems that had been dramatically overhauled by Obamacare. The failure was probably a good thing for the subsequent political fortunes of the Republican Party. Republicans still lost badly in 2018, but had they actually caused that much devastation and disorder, they would have lost even worse and likely not come close in 2020. But it's rather mysterious that the Republican Party has coalesced around an even more unhinged healthcare agenda. Not only repealing Obamacare, but also slashing Medicaid and Medicare to the bone. This should be electoral poison, if voters ever actually hear about it. Ronald Brownstein outlines the details at The Atlantic. Both the House Republican Study Committee and Project 2025, recently covered by The Prospect, would repeal the requirement for insurers to offer affordable coverage to people with pre-existing conditions, would transform Medicare from insurance into a private voucher, and turn both Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, into a state block grant. That is a fixed pot of money for states with certain rules about how it can be used, rather than a mandatory spending program that anyone can access if they're eligible. For good measure, Republicans would also repeal the Inflation Reduction Act's provision, allowing the government to negotiate what Medicare pays for certain prescription drugs. It's hard to say with any precision what this would do to the healthcare system, especially because a lot will depend on how states react, but it's not a stretch to say that it would be an utter catastrophe. At a minimum, tens of millions of people would lose their coverage in the private market. Tens of millions more will lose their Medicaid coverage. The experience with welfare reform, in which a New Deal era cash benefit for very poor mothers was turned into a block grant, suggests that Medicaid and CHIP will cease to exist entirely in many conservative states. These days, Republican states routinely spend their welfare money on, quote, crisis pregnancy centers, which spread disinformation about abortion, or in the case of Mississippi, just give the money to Brett Favre. Jeez, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. All this would wreak untold havoc with providers at a time when hospital consolidation, ruthless private equity asset stripping, and lack of insurance coverage in certain regions are already driving many hospitals to cut their services, especially labor and also delivery units. If not close up entirely, huge chunks of important provider revenue streams will vanish overnight. The phenomenon of healthcare deserts, quote unquote, where people lack nearby access to basic medical care services, or medical services, I should say, will skyrocket. All told, as Brownstein writes, the plan, quote, calls for cutting federal spending on health care by $4.5 trillion over the next decade. That cut is 4 times as much as the GOP envisioned cutting in its 2017 bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act. This enormous threat has barely sunk in among the public. In a recent Kaiser Family Foundation poll, 43% of adults said they were not sure if Trump had a plan to replace Obamacare. Even more tellingly, 48% said that Trump had the better approach to the law as compared to Biden's 50%. But 92% said it was important that people not be denied coverage because of their medical history. That is the exact protection Republicans want to get rid of. Clearly, the median voter has little or no idea that Trump wants to gore Obamacare, let alone block grant the Medicaid program and fully privatize Medicare. In fact, Joe Biden is busily fixing the bits of the healthcare system that Trump did manage to mangle. Last week, the administration released a new rule limiting off-chain junk insurance plans that Trump had willed into being, which have lower premiums but do not provide baseline benefits like prescription drugs or maternity coverage, and simply do not cover patients with certain pre-existing conditions, leaving them with no insurance support when they most need it. Presumably, the only people who know that Trump created crappy insurance that only works if you never use it are those with the misfortune of signing up for the plans. Trump himself seems to blearily realize this isn't a great issue for him. In 2016, he won the Republican primary by boasting that he was the only candidate who had promised to protect Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. But in office, he nearly killed Obamacare, and he has since repeatedly called for it to be replaced, which makes his current walkbacks less than convincing, over and above the garbled syntax from his dissolving brain. Quote, I'm not running to terminate the ACA, unquote, he recently posted on Truth Social. Quote, as crooked Joe Biden disinformates and misinformates all the time, unquote. The lady doth protest too much, methinks, says Ryan Cooper. Still, getting this message out will be a challenge. The Democrats do not have anything like the propaganda foghorn that conservatives do. And I have to ask the question here, can't help myself. Since the Democrats these days are out raising the Republicans and will probably do so again in 2024, why is it that they don't have anything like the propaganda foghorn that conservatives do? What exactly are they doing wrong? And also face a long-standing problem that Republican plans are so extreme that voters commonly refuse to believe them. This is especially true on health care. As Robert Draper wrote in the New York Times magazine, when back in mid-2012, Obama campaign staffers convened focus groups to test messaging on Mitt Romney's health care and tax plans, quote, respondents simply refused to believe that any politician would do such a thing, unquote. President Biden and the rest of his party better get cracking. Get cracking about what? Get cracking about telling the people the truth about Trump's health care plans for them. In any case, this article certainly underlines the idea that if you care about health care, if that's a big issue for you, as it is for most of us, then don't vote for Donald Trump. But after all, what can you do? Well, you might ask, why not vote for Joe Biden? He's supporting the Affordable Care Act, isn't he? Yes, but how good is the Affordable Care Act? Here's a piece on the Medicare Advantage program entitled Campaigners Beat, quote, greedy, unquote, insurance giants exploiting Medicare Advantage. What? The Medicare Advantage program is being exploited? Who would have guessed? Quote, the private insurance industry is used to getting its way. But this year we out-organized them, said one's People's Action leader. As insurance company stock fell 6 to 12% on Tuesday, in response to the Biden administration's Medicare Advantage announcement, one healthcare campaigner celebrated that the U.S. government didn't cave to the, quote, greedy, unquote, industry's pressure. Quote, the private insurance industry is used to getting its way, but this year we out-organized them, unquote, declared Aja Nemer Anirudh, the People's Action Healthcare for All campaign director. Medicare Advantage plans, MA, are an alternative to traditional coverage under the federal health insurance program for people with disabilities and those aged 65 or older. They are administered by private insurance companies known for denying patients necessary care and overcharging the government, which costs taxpayers up to $140 billion extra each year. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, announced Monday that, quote, payments from the government to Medicare Advantage plans are expected to increase on average by 3.7%, or over $16 billion from 2024 to 2025. The federal government is projected to pay between $500 and $600 billion in Medicare Advantage payments to private health plans in 2025. First unveiled in January, the 3.7% is higher than what campaigners wanted. Last week, Alex Lawson of Social Security Works and Brittany Shanahan, another Shanahan, not Nicole Shanahan, Brittany Shanahan, spelled differently, of Public Citizen delivered to the White House around 28,000 petition signatures urging Joe Biden to, quote, reduce Medicare Advantage rates to a level commensurate with traditional Medicare and recoup all overpayments, unquote. However, the rate is also far less than what insurers and industry groups were demanding, and as Reuters noted Monday, the decision was a departure from the norm, as CMS, quote, typically raises the final reimbursement from the advanced notice, unquote. This is a tweet from Social Security Works. The Medicare disadvantage plans demanded even more money, but at POTUS stood strong. Well, what a change. That was a quote tweet. Okay, this was a quote tweet of a tweet from Be a Hero. The announcement shows that at POTUS is listening to us. He wasn't fooled, and we aren't either. The 2025 payment rate is expected to be a whopping $16 billion increase to insurance companies offering Medicare disadvantage plans. There is a growing grass movement standing shoulder to shoulder. Quote, the Medicare is one of the most popular government programs because it delivers health care to people when and where they need it. said Badnemer Anarud. Quote, again, private insurance companies like United Healthcare spent millions in advertising and lobbying in Washington to demand more of our public money for privatized so-called, quote, Medicare Advantage, unquote, plans. The People's Action leader pointed out that, quote, we countered their lobbying by helping people share their stories with lawmakers about how Medicare Advantage plans harmed them by denying care when they needed it most. Quote, we commend the Biden administration for listening to our people and refusing to cave to the insurance lobby's demands, unquote. The campaigner added, quote, we urge President Biden to do more to rein in abuse of the Medicare program by private corporations and reinvest public funds into expanding and strengthening traditional Medicare. As private insurers have grown their Medicare Advantage businesses, quote, concerns about the cost of the program have been rising for years from wonkier corners of Washington, unquote. Bloomberg's John Totsi reported Tuesday. According to his newsletter, we went years without the advocacy community really paying attention to it, says Wendell Potter, who left a career doing public relations for health insurers to become an outspoken critic of the industry. That shifted over the last year or two, he said, as a loose group of advocates coalesced around the issue. Potter said advocates now get face-to-face meetings with top Biden administration officials about the issue. Potter partnered with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, a leader in the fight for Medicare for All. Some would debate that, I believe. A single-payer healthcare system that would cover everyone nationwide, for a Newsweek op-ed published just before the CMS announcement. The pair took aim at the insurance industry's, quote, disinformation campaign, unquote, about what they call, quote, the Medicare disadvantage, unquote. First off, the industry claims that Medicare Advantage plans reduce costs. This is simply not true, Potter and Jayapal explained. And it gets worse. While big insurance touts the coverage that Medicare Advantage plans provide, the reality is Medicare Advantage plans often provide worse coverage than traditional Medicare. Here's a tweet from Jayapal. In case you missed it, Medicare Disadvantage plans are overcharging patients by 22%, costing taxpayers $83 billion a year. We need to stop this privatization of Medicare that puts profits over patients and keep working to expand health care for seniors, okay, and all Americans. From MarketWatch, the claim is that Medicare Advantage is overbilling Medicare by 22%. If Joe Biden or Donald Trump or anyone else wants to know how to, quote, cut tens of billions from the Medicare budget without taking a single nickel from seniors, and of course, the way to do that is get rid of Medicare Advantage. They wrote that, quote, another important characteristic of Medicare Advantage plans is their aggressive use of tools to delay and deny care, such as prior authorization, which is seldom used in traditional Medicare, and rarely for services like physician-administered cancer treatments. That is, no one wants chemotherapy if they don't need it, unquote. Quote again, but Medicare Advantage plans also drive health inequalities, contrary to big insurance claims, unquote. They continued, and quote again, and the industry's biggest and boldest piece of disinformation is that the Medicare Advantage plans will be forced to cut benefits if the government stops massive overpayments that have been padding corporate profits for decades, unquote. Quote again, this is wholly false, they stressed. And quote, yet again, and you want to know how we know? Because we have reduced overpayments before. So Medicare Advantage programs that are Part K of Medicare and that are strongly supported by the Biden administration along with its support for the Affordable Care Act, overbill people substantially and also tend to deny services to people. What's the cure for that? The cure is not only to get rid of Medicare disadvantage completely, but it is also, of course, to pass a Medicare for All bill, which is what both Jayapal and Wendell Potter and many other people, including myself, are advocating for. What would be the cost savings if we went to a Medicare for All bill? Well, in fiscal year 2022, if I recall correctly, total health expenditures in this country were $4.3 trillion per year. If you look at what percent of GDP that is, well, that's roughly 18.5% of GDP that year that we Americans spend on our healthcare system, in part because we have the Medicare Advantage programs. But when we look at the OECD nations and what the average OECD nation, which has a universal healthcare system, including some that have actual Medicare for All systems, their average expenditure on healthcare, and it's a more effective expenditure also because their life expectancies are much higher than our own. The average expenditure is not 18.4% of GDP, but it's roughly 9.9% of GDP, a little under 10%. In other words, to oversimplify a bit, if we went to the kind of universal healthcare systems that other nations have, such as, for example, Canada has, or New Zealand has, or Australia has, or if we went to a national health service program, such as England has, instead of spending $4.3 trillion per year, we might be spending 50% of that, or roughly $2.2 trillion per year. That's a savings, of course, of $2.1 trillion a year, or $20.1 trillion over 10 years. That would be the advantage of shifting to a Medicare for All system. But if you care about healthcare, then why would you vote for Joe Biden, who is largely dedicated to doing the will of the healthcare interest? Now, I know that sometimes he departs from that, as he did in this campaign for containing Medicare disadvantage he sided with the campaigners. But we have to lift our eyes from that situation to the broader goal. He had no wish at all to pass a Medicare for All bill. He's against Medicare for All. Trump is against Medicare for All. Biden is against Medicare for All. If you're a healthcare voter, if that's very important to you, if you want to get a healthcare system that is free at the point of service, then you can't vote for either Biden or Trump. They both are simply the enemies of universal health care and of a universal healthcare system that ensures everybody, where nobody, is uninsured, where nobody goes bankrupt, where nobody's family breaks up because of stresses and strains due to a healthcare system that does not work for people. So, who should you vote for? Well, you shouldn't vote for Bobby Kennedy yet, because Bobby Kennedy has said that even though ideally he likes, a Medicare for All system, he also said on the Breaking Points program, was it Breaking Points? I forget. It was an interview with Crystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski, if I recall correctly. And they were interviewing Bobby. I think it was on the Breaking Points program. And Bobby said, well, he was for Medicare for All, in principle. But he wasn't going to fight for it because it was too heavy a lift for him. So he said he's not going to fight for it. He also said he's not for getting rid of the filibuster, because that's a wonderful democratic institution of the Senate. You put those two things together, and you see it would be impossible for him to pass, a Medicare for All bill, which means that whatever he says, he's actually against, a Medicare for All bill. Now, maybe he'll change his mind when more live streams like this one come out. I certainly hope so. But if he doesn't, we then come down to roughly 3 candidates who are for Medicare for All. There is Claudia de la Cruz. There is Cornel West. And there is Jill Stein. If you care about healthcare, you really care about healthcare, those are the 3 real choices that you have. Now, I know it's difficult because these candidates have no money and they cannot get their message out. Their message is just simply ignored. Everybody is ignorant. Nobody even knows Claudia de la Cruz is running. Many people don't know Cornel West is running. And many people don't know Jill Stein, is running. But if you really care about having health care for everybody, then those are your choices. So it doesn't look real good. But we don't want to give up just yet because we have an event that is coming up. And that event is one that is actually being sponsored by Cornell West. And here is the announcement for the event. It's called the Healing Us, that is Healing US in caps, Candlelight of Vigil for Danny DeNoyer, and Medicare for All. All berets are hand knit by Laura Fielding, who founded the grassroots coalition of the Red Berets Medicare for All. She is an associate producer of Healing Us, which is a documentary about healthcare in the United States that advocates for universal healthcare and specifically for Medicare for All at the national level, for state-based single payer also, failing that, and for National Health Service if that, were possible. Going on, and in this quote, this moment in a movement, unquote, Laura is a love warrior for truth, justice, and love. Oh, I'm sorry. The love warrior for truth, justice, and love is Cornel West for president, 2024. The berets are crafted with a variety of fibers. Please hand wash only. And remember, quote, justice is what love looks like in public, unquote. That quote is from Brother Cornel West. I am wearing, a red beret tonight that was knitted for me by Laura Fielding, and I treasure it. I have a number of others that will also kindly either knitted or crocheted for me by some of the other wonderful members of Red Berets Medicare for All. 1. Truth, Justice, Love, inspired by Brother West and his invitation for all of us to, quote, join the band, includes a button and the combined price of the red beret and the button, which, by the way, was probably made by, well, I'm not sure who the button was made by, so I probably shouldn't say, but the two together come for a donation of $50. If you want to keep it funky, the energy was palpable in Cortland, Oregon, knit with love and gratitude for the laughter and the music. The button is included, and there's a picture, of the red beret, and the button is a Cornel West button with Cornel's face on it. Then there's Love Supreme, a tribute to Brother West and Love Warriors. There are two of these berets because as Scott DeNoyer says, quote, no one fights alone, unquote. We support each other in service to truth, justice, and love. That button is included for a donation of $60. You see two different buttons here, in the photo. 4, there is Danny Strong. That reference, is to Danny DeNoyer, Scott's son, who, failing to get his medication from one of the grasping health insurance companies that he was dealing with, became despondent and committed the suicide by driving his car into a lake, in upstate, but New York. He handcuffed himself to the steering wheel so that he wasn't going to break a window and to survive. And his father, Scott, is a leading campaigner, for Medicare for All, and has been so for years. The vigil that we're talking about here is for Danny and is fully supported by Scott. And the number 4 combination is Scott Denoyer is healing us with love in action. Solidarity is at the heart of every action he shows up for. This beret includes a walk for a suicide prevention button and a hand-carved healthcare solidarity pin, both made by Scott. Please donate generously for this humble beret, $99 or more, if you feel moved, to do so. And there is the picture, of Danny on one of the buttons, Danny Strong. And then, the other button is a heart that unites people from one end of the country to the other in support, of Medicare for All. Then there's Justice for All, the founding of a grassroots party grounded in truth, justice, and love, with purposeful intentionality and care and solidarity with, quote, the least of these, unquote, is an enormous undertaking. This giant beret is a knit honor of so many beautiful people. Includes a Justice for All button. There is the Justice for All button on top of the beret. Then there's number 6, a humble hat. To be humble is to be so sure of oneself and one's mission that one can forego calling excessive attention to oneself and status, unquote. This is a quote from Cornel West. Race matters. There are 2 of these humble berets. They're very simple to knit, as berets go, but they're absolutely knit with love. The button included because assembly is required, and the donation cost for that is $27. And 7, healing us with love, with eternal gratitude to the filmmakers of Healing Us, www.healingusnetwork.com, and all of the Medicare for All movement. We, the 99%, includes a Healing Us button, also made by Scott, for $99. Then there's a Lady Liberty button. How can we ever thank, it's a beret and a button, thank Susan Sarandon enough from the bottom of our hearts for lending her powerful voice as Lady Liberty in the documentary. She is healing us with love. And there's a Healing Us beret with a Lady Liberty button included for $99. And number 9, Medicare for All and Beyond. Have you all read Brother West's healthcare justice platform. These berets are a tribute to, quote, not me, us, unquote. We, the 99%, will bring M for all. Bernie, quote, wrote the damn bill, unquote. But we are the ones who must do the work of fighting on all fronts. That includes for state level single payer, until health care is guaranteed as a human right to all. Buttons of vintage, crafted for red berets in 2020 included. And there it is. I wrote, okay, the Dan bill, okay, with the beret. When is this event? It's on April 9th, 2024 at 8 p.m. Well, actually, it's from April 9th, 2024, okay, at 8 p.m. to April 12th, 2024. And when I put this up, the RSVPs for this event were at 5, but I'm going to refresh this now. Oh, well, still says they're 5, but I know that since then, when I clicked OK on an update, the number of RSVPs had grown to 12. That's before I put in my RSVP. Oops. Let me get that back. Here we are. So these berets for now, some of them are still available, I guess. Some of them are sold out already. But this is a candlelight vigil event. Then that's going to be held from April 9th to April 12th. There will be a Zoom event, okay, that is associated with it. When you RSVP, you get the links, okay, to go to the Zoom event, okay, and to become, okay, a part of it. So, I hope I've promoted it sufficiently here. I do want to say something else, okay, about not simply the specific event, okay, but about, in the current political context, how we get, okay, a Medicare for all, how we actually get it. First thing we have to do is note, once again, we're not getting it from Joe Biden. And we have to note, we're not getting it from Donald Trump. And as we noted, right at the moment, we're not getting it, okay, from Bobby Kennedy. That presents a problem because as much as we may like the platforms of Cornel West 2024, also Claudia de la Cruz, okay, or Jill Stein, none of them seems able to get, okay, their message out. With Bobby Kennedy's new choice for the vice presidency, specifically Nicole Shanahan, he will have the money to get his message out because she has plenty of money to invest in the campaign to get him on the ballot, okay, in all the states. And if his percentage in polling increases to 15%, it is even likely that he will get onto the debate stage. The same cannot be said for the other candidates. I am not advocating a vote for Bobby Kennedy. I am not here to endorse him. What I do want to say is that I think that while we continue to work for the candidates that are in favor of Medicare for All now and do our best to see that a movement for one or more of them actually develops, we also have to find room for pressuring Bobby Kennedy to change his mind and to come out for Medicare for All, okay, or for a national health service between now, okay, and election time. If he does that, first of all, he will have a much better chance of winning. Second of all, of course, he will have to not only come out for that, but he will have to come out for getting rid of the filibuster also. Because if he doesn't get rid of the filibuster, he won't be able to have Medicare for All. It won't pass. So we need those two changes, at least, okay, in his platform, to have him considered as a realistic possibility for the support of people who really care about healthcare, who I believe are people like us. So, how do we get him to change his mind? I'm a firm believer in being very critical of him, but paying attention to him. I firmly believe that we need to hassle him when it comes to Medicare for All, when it comes to the filibuster, of course, when it comes to his position on Israel and Gaza. His position is absolutely ridiculous. We have to go at him hard to try to get him to change. Well, why go at him hard and not go at Joe Biden hard, okay, and Donald Trump hard? Because neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden will change. They think they are in the fight. They have hard positions when it comes to Medicare for All. Nothing we can do can possibly change them. But Bobby Kennedy, okay, is more open-minded, and with the right sort of campaign, we may be able to change his mind. What about the dump the corruption narrative? What about the idea that we cannot vote for him because he is taking big money? Especially, he's bringing the big money to the campaign. He's basically sold out to his vice presidential candidate, who he will owe big. Well, to that, okay, I have to say that it is better to have sold out to one person who is your vice presidential candidate and shares your platform than it is to sell out to the numerous interests that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump have sold out to. So what I have to say is that among the three of them, Bobby Kennedy is the least, of evils, especially so if we can change his mind. Now, perhaps Jill Stein or Cornel West, or Claudia de la Cruz are preferable if we're looking for an ideal, to vote for. And they're also preferable if we're looking for people to vote against, as in the dump the corruption idea. But we have to face the fact that our dump the corruption campaign is not very big at this point. It's very small. That the campaigns of Jill Stein and Cornel West and Claudia de la Cruz are also very small. And I don't think the message of these three campaigns would get out in time for any of those candidates, to win. So I think it's worthwhile to try to change Bobby Kennedy's mind so that he becomes a more acceptable candidate to us when it comes time to vote. Now I will look at your comments, of course. There's Robert Copeland at 8:05. Donald Trump is deranged and never should be president. Robert, that's absolutely true. But Joe Biden is deranged also and never should be president. Why do I say that? Because Joe Biden has put us at risk of nuclear war for the first time in 40 years. I can't seem to get people to take that seriously. We are under the gun for nuclear war right now, and the crises get more serious by the day, not the Ukrainian crisis, which is starting to get a little less serious as it becomes apparent that the Ukrainians have lost. But we're in the middle of the Gaza crisis, and we have Israel trying to escalate it into a regional war, which would carry with it the risk, of nuclear war, because the Russians and Chinese are standing behind Iran and the axis of resistance in West Asia. So I believe that any president who would subject us to the risk, of nuclear war, never should be president. He is president now, but he shouldn't be president again. Let us not forget also, he is the president who is so far facilitating and is complicit, in a genocide. And a president who is complicit, in a genocide never should be president. Andy says, hiya, Joe. I'll be in and out. Pudding pies are still up. Okay. Robert Copeland says, AB 2200, better known as CalCare, will have a hearing on April 23rd in the Assembly Health Committee. That's good news. I'm glad it's advancing at least a little bit. Kay Ryan says, hi, all. Steve Overton says, hello, everybody. Robert Copeland says, hello, everybody. Steve says, Robert, that is great. And Steve says, hi, Kay and Andy. Kay says, hi, Steve and Robert. Steve shared to FB groups. Thank you. I believe I shared to the FB groups too. California is big enough to have its own healthcare system for all. It is big enough, and the single-payer healthcare system will save money in California. There's no question it will save money. It may not save money when you look at taxes, but overall, it will save money for the individuals in it. They may pay more in taxes, but they will pay less in premiums and in other costs. And in the end, shifting to single payer will be better for them from the standpoint of service and will be better for them from the standpoint of money saved. Robert Coleman says the people that don't know about MMT will say Medicare will go bankrupt in less than a decade, as it could go bankrupt in 2031. That I listened on a Zoom meeting just yesterday. Well, that's true. So we have to teach them, about MMT and point out that Medicare for all that can't go bankrupt. In fact, there's a very easy way to stop any question of bankruptcy, and that is you could put in the bill, in the Medicare for all bill, you could put the overt congressional finance instruction right into the Medicare for all bill. And then Medicare could never go bankrupt. Of course, it can't go bankrupt anyway because it's not the kind of federal program that can go bankrupt. I mean, bankrupt is a legal category, and it refers to going before a judge and being taken into bankruptcy. When we use bankrupt in the context of a federal program, that means the program, has run out of money. But of course, the Congress can always stop that simply by appropriating new money for the program. So what you have to do is to pass the law in such a way that it contains a provision that ensures that Congress will always have to appropriate, the money. Robert says President Biden will throw out a few crumbs to the people and not fix any of the problems we have now, including the broken healthcare system. I realize that. Steve Wolfbrand says, Cornell is unserious, Claudia is basically unknown. Steve says, let's face it, folks, we're screwed. I never faced that, Steve. And the reason why I don't is just, it's not in my nature to say we're screwed and not to fight. And that is, in a way, what this stream, is about. I know we're screwed because of the way the system works and the way all the money goes, most all the money goes to Biden, and to Trump. And also because we failed to create a successful dump the corruption campaign. But still, we have something we can fight for. That something is to change Bobby Kennedy's mind on certain key issues. Because if his mind gets changed, and given the fact that he now has the money in his campaign, and given the polling he already has, he'll have a chance to beat both Biden and Trump. So there's a glimmer of hope, and we have to use it to fight. Steve Wolfman says, I'm ordering some kafias for myself and a couple good friends. Wink, wink, Doc. Okay, Steve. And Robert says, Scott DeNoyer makes buttons supporting single-payer healthcare. He does. Robert says, should be, I know that Scott makes buttons. He does make buttons. And he says some of the buttons were most likely made by Scott. They were definitely made by Scott. We can recognize the buttons that were definitely made by Scott. And it describes them. In the event, description, it describes the buttons that were made by Scott. Says, I'll vote for Biden, not Rump. So what you're saying is you'll vote for inverted totalitarianism and not for fascism. Well, I can understand that point of view. Okay, at least if we vote for inverted totalitarianism, we won't be taken out and put into a concentration camp. We won't be taken out, okay, and executed on the spot, and we won't be torn limb from limb by an angry mob. So those are some reasons to prefer inverted totalitarianism to the naked fascism that Trump offers. But I think what we have to do is make the larger decision, make a decision that both of these people, okay, are unacceptable. And the reason for that, okay, is that inverted totalitarianism sooner or later leads to fascism. If you think about it, the voters rejected fascism in 2020. They did. But then Biden came into office and he botched up things to such a degree that right now Trump is a greater threat than he was in 2020. That's because inverted totalitarianism leads to fascism. All we do by voting for Biden is to postpone the victory of fascism, to postpone it once again. And that is not good enough. If we could do what I say with respect to Bobby Kennedy, we could have a president that could change our situation for the better drastically. I agree, a lot has to be changed, though. Steve says Tulsi would make a great Secretary of State for Bobby, in my opinion. Well, I don't think Tulsi would be bad, but I think a better Secretary of State, and one that he should unhesitatingly appoint, is Jeffrey Sachs. He has connections all over the world. He is a great thinker when it comes to diplomacy. He has a lot of diplomatic experience, has a lot of consulting experience, and he brings a real desire for peace, okay, to the table. The kind of desire for peace that had motivated John Fitzgerald Kennedy, okay, and also Bobby Kennedy's father. Jeffrey Sachs is steeped in Kennedy thinking about how to diffuse conflict and how to disarm the world once more. We need a Secretary of State like that. We need a Secretary of State that will completely reorient our foreign policy. And that will be Jeffrey Sachs. Kay says, good night, all. Steve says, good night, Kay. Steve Wolfbrand says, how about Scott Ritter, Secretary of State? Steve, I would love to have Scott Ritter as Secretary of State as well. But I think Jeffrey Sachs would be a more effective Secretary of State. But how about Scott Ritter as Secretary of Defense? Or how about Scott Ritter as the CIA director? Remember, one big job for a new Kennedy administration would be reforming the CIA. And who better than Scott Ritter to do that? Scott has the background, in intelligence. He can call on the wisdom, of intelligence gurus who are too old to serve, in the administration. And Scott has a will of iron, which is what you're going to need if you want to reform, the CIA. So I say Sachs for Secretary of State and Scott for either Director of the CIA or perhaps even Secretary of Defense. But I suspect Secretary of Defense, that position will probably fall in a Kennedy administration to Douglas McGregor, who would, I think, make a very great Secretary of Defense because, let's face it, we have to completely reform, our military. It is not fit for purpose right now. It was fit for a hegemon fighting brush wars in various aspects, of the world. But of course, we had to be the hegemon. We were then, during the 1990s. But we've lost our advantage now. We are no longer the hegemon. We are the declining hegemon. And therefore, we have to refit our Defense Department so that is fit for purpose, which is defending us, in our region. So, interesting suggestions, Steve. I'll be back tomorrow night. I don't know if I'll have time. I keep trying to get back to the shorter shows. I didn't have time today to design shorter shows. They actually take more time, than the longer shows. In part because you have to schedule them and you have to promote them and such. And so for me today, it was best to do a rather long show. Not as long as yesterday, but we've run now for almost an hour and 15 minutes. So I thank you for coming. I'm going to say good night. I note that the title of this program was not as attractive to people as the first two programs, of the week. I think that signifies that right now, Medicare for All is not a hot topic. And it also signals that supporters, of Medicare for All feel hopeless because they know national politics is shaping up in such a way that there will be no consideration, for Medicare for All. We have to change that. We have to change that. Let's hope that, the event and the showing of Healing Us, at that event, does something to bring the Medicare for All issue back as once again central to the people, as it was in 2016, as it was in 2020, when Bernie was running in both of those races. So again, thank you for coming, and I will see you tomorrow night, and good night for tonight.